I'm Rachel Bennett, 28, and I spent my wedding day staring at an empty row of seats. The venue was perfect, white roses cascading from crystal vases, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, and my wonderful fiancé Thomas waiting at the altar. Everything was exactly as I'd dreamed, except for one devastating detail. Not a single member of my family was there. No mother to help with my veil, no father to walk me down the aisle, no siblings to celebrate with. Just vacant chairs and a text from my sister Madison that morning. Sorry, sis, none of us got the invite. Maybe check with the postal service? Have a nice day. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt abandoned by the people who should have loved you most. This story gets worse before it gets better, and I need you with me through every heartbreaking moment as I reveal how my family's betrayal taught me what true love really means. 6 months earlier, my life couldn't have been more perfect. Thomas had proposed during our weekend trip to the coast, getting down on one knee as waves crashed behind us. The ring wasn't flashy, a modest diamond surrounded by tiny sapphires that matched my eyes, but it represented everything I loved about him. Thoughtful, sincere, and completely attuned to who I really was. "It's perfect," I had whispered as he slid it onto my finger, tears streaming down my face. "You're perfect." When we returned home, my mother Karen was the first person I called. Her initial reaction seemed positive. "Oh, sweetie, that's wonderful news," she said. "We'll have to celebrate when your father gets back from his business trip." It wasn't until she saw the ring in person that I noticed the first warning sign, a slight narrowing of her eyes, a barely perceptible tightening of her smile. "It's quaint," she said, examining my hand. "I suppose it suits a teacher's salary." Her comment stung, but I brushed it off. My family hadn't always been wealthy. Until I was 14, we'd lived comfortably but modestly in a suburban neighborhood. Then my father, Williams Construction Company, landed several major contracts, and suddenly we were moving into a mansion in the exclusive Oak Ridge community. New cars, country club memberships, and private school for my younger sister Madison followed. Despite the lifestyle change, I'd remained grounded. I'd already been in high school when we moved up in the world, my values and friendships already established. Madison, 4 years younger, had adapted more completely to our new social standing. My older brother Ryan, 6 years my senior, had already been in college, but he too seemed to embrace the family's elevated status on his visits home. Thomas came from a solidly working-class background. His father was a mechanic, his mother a nurse. He'd worked his way through college and now taught 3rd grade at an elementary school in a challenging district. He loved his work and was exceptional at it, winning Teacher of the Year twice already. 6 months isn't much time to plan a proper wedding, my mother commented when we announced our desired date. Quality venues book years in advance. Why the rush? We don't want anything extravagant, I explained, just something intimate and meaningful. My father had frowned at this. Nonsense. My daughter isn't getting married in some backyard ceremony. We'll help with the costs, and you'll do it properly. Despite their insistence on a proper wedding, my parents remained surprisingly uninvolved in the actual planning. My mother declined to come dress shopping, claiming scheduling conflicts. My father promised financial support, but became evasive whenever I tried to discuss specific numbers. Still, I remained optimistic. I threw myself into planning, finding a beautiful historic chapel that had a cancellation for our preferred date. I selected flowers, chose a caterer, and picked out bridesmaid dresses with my friends Jessica and Alicia, who were thrilled to stand beside me. Madison had agreed to be a bridesmaid too, though her enthusiasm seemed forced. "I suppose I can make it work with my schedule," she'd said with a sigh. 3 months before the wedding, I personally delivered formal invitations to each family member. My parents' invitation was an elegant cream-colored card with gold embossing. I handed it to my mother at Sunday dinner. "It's official," I said excitedly. "I can't wait for you all to be there." My mother examined the invitation. The chapel on Westmore Avenue? That's interesting." "It's beautiful, Mom. Wait until you see it decorated. I'm sure it will be lovely, dear, she replied, setting the invitation aside without opening it fully. My father barely glanced at his. Just tell us when to show up. I delivered Ryan's invitation to his downtown apartment, Madison's to her college dorm, and mailed ones to extended family members, including my grandmother Gloria, who lived an hour away. Despite their lukewarm reactions, everyone verbally confirmed they would attend. Ryan promised to prepare a toast. Madison reluctantly attended a single dress fitting before claiming her class schedule was too demanding for more. Everything will come together, I assured Thomas, after expressing my concerns about my family's apparent disinterest. They'll be there when it counts. Family always shows up for the important moments. How naive I was to believe that. 2 months before the wedding, the warning signs became impossible to ignore. My mother, who had initially insisted on being involved in every decision, suddenly couldn't make time for even the most important planning activities. Cake tasting? Sorry, darling. I have a charity committee meeting that cannot be rescheduled. Final venue walkthrough? Oh, that conflicts with my tennis lesson. You understand. My father, who had promised to help financially, became increasingly difficult to pin down for specific discussions. Dad, I need to put down the final payment for the caterer this week, I said during one of my visits home. Right, he mumbled, not looking up from his newspaper. Talk to your mother about that. Mom said to talk to you. You promised to help, remember? Not a good time, Rachel. I have a conference call in 5 minutes. It was always not a good time. Eventually, Thomas and I decided to cover all the expenses ourselves, rather than continue the frustrating dance around my parents' vague promises. Madison, who had reluctantly agreed to be a bridesmaid, began canceling fittings and skipping planning meetings. Sorry, can't make the final dress alteration. Professor moved up a deadline, came her text, 15 minutes after she was supposed to arrive. When I called rather than texted, she answered with obvious annoyance. It's just a wedding, Rachel. Not everyone can drop everything for your big day. Ryan, who had initially seemed supportive, stopped returning my calls entirely. His promised toast remained unwritten, his tuxedo unrented. The engagement party, a small gathering I'd organized at our favorite restaurant, should have been the first real celebration with both our families. Thomas's parents, James and Susan Miller, arrived early, bearing thoughtful gifts and genuine excitement. But as the evening progressed, the empty seats at the table reserved for my family became increasingly conspicuous. 10 minutes after the scheduled start time, I received a text from my mother. Something came up. Send our regrets to Thomas and his family. No explanation. No rescheduling suggestion. Just absence. Thomas squeezed my hand under the table. Are you okay? He whispered. Fine, I lied, blinking back tears. They're just busy. His concerned expression told me he wasn't fooled. But he didn't press the issue in front of his parents and our friends. After the engagement party, I received an unexpected call from my grandmother, Gloria, my mother's mother. Though we'd always been close, her health issues had limited our time together in recent years. Rachel, dear, I need to speak with you, she said, her voice uncharacteristically serious. Can you come by tomorrow? The next day, I sat in her cozy living room, surrounded by photographs of family gatherings from happier times. Your mother called me yesterday, she began, pouring tea with slightly shaky hands. She told me not to attend your wedding. What? Why would she do that? She says the family has decided to boycott. Something about sending you a message about your choice of husband. The teacup clattered against its saucer as my hands began to tremble. Boycott? That can't be right. I'm afraid it is, dear. Your father doesn't approve of Thomas's background, thinks you could do better. Your mother agrees. They've convinced Ryan and Madison to stand with them. That's ridiculous. Thomas is kind, intelligent, hardworking. I know, dear. I've met him, remember? He's a wonderful young man. But your parents, she sighed heavily. Since your father's business took off, they've become different. Status conscious in a way they never were before. I left my grandmother's house in a daze, driving straight to my parents' home to confront them. My mother answered the door with a look of mild surprise. "Rachel, we weren't expecting you." "Is it true?" I demanded, following her into the immaculate kitchen. "Are you planning to skip my wedding?" She busied herself with arranging flowers in a vase. "Don't be dramatic. There are just some scheduling conflicts we're trying to work around. Grandma says you told her not to come, that you're organizing some kind of family boycott." My mother's movements stilled. My mother should learn to keep private family matters private. "So it's true?" She turned to face me, her expression hardening. "Rachel, you're making a mistake. Thomas is a nice enough young man, but he's not from our world. Your father and I had such hopes for you." "Your world? Mom, we were middle class until I was 14. Thomas and I make good money between us. We'll be fine." It's not just about money. It's about connections, about fitting in. You could have had anyone, doctors, lawyers, businessmen. Instead, you chose a public school teacher with no prospects. The conversation devolved from there, with my mother making increasingly elitist remarks about Thomas and his family. When my father arrived home, he backed her position completely. "You're being impulsive," he said dismissively. "Marry in haste, repent at leisure." Despite my tears and arguments, they remained unmoved. I left feeling devastated but even more determined to proceed with our plans. Thomas deserved better than their judgment, and so did I. In a last-ditch effort to salvage the situation, I invited my parents to dinner at an upscale restaurant the following week. To my surprise, they accepted. Over expensive wine and perfectly cooked steaks, I made an emotional appeal. "I love him," I said simply. "He makes me happy. Isn't that what you've always said you wanted for me?" Something in my expression must have reached them, because my mother's face softened slightly. "Of course we want you to be happy, darling. Then be there for my wedding. Please. It would mean everything to me." My father reached across the table to pat my hand. "We'll be there, no matter what." The dinner ended with hugs and what seemed like genuine reconciliation. In the weeks that followed, they even asked occasional questions about the wedding plans, which I took as a positive sign. The week before the wedding, I sent final confirmation texts to all family members. Everyone responded positively. My mother even offered to help with my hair on the big day. Ryan confirmed he'd pick up Grandma Gloria. Madison complained about the early start time, but confirmed she'd be there for pre-ceremony photos. I went to bed the night before my wedding filled with joyful anticipation, believing the family drama was behind us. I couldn't have been more wrong. The morning of my wedding dawned bright and clear. I arrived at the chapel early with Jessica and Alicia, excitement bubbling through my nervousness. The wedding planner, Olivia, greeted us with champagne and pastries in the bridal suite. "Your dress is hung up and steamed," she said cheerfully. "Hair and makeup artists will be here in 20 minutes. Is your mother on her way?" "She should be arriving soon," I replied, checking my phone. No messages yet, but it was still early. As my friends and I sipped champagne and shared excited whispers about the day ahead, I kept glancing at the door, expecting my mother or Madison to arrive at any moment. The makeup artist finished her work, followed by the hairstylist who created an elegant updo adorned with small white flowers. By 11 o'clock, an hour before the ceremony, my stomach was knotting with anxiety. Neither my mother nor Madison had arrived for the pre-ceremony photos scheduled at 11:15. Ryan hadn't checked in about picking up Grandma Gloria. My father, who was supposed to meet me in the anteroom at 11:30, hadn't sent a single message. "Should I try calling them?" Jessica offered, noticing my frequent glances at my silent phone. Before I could answer, a text notification appeared on my screen. Madison's name. Finally, I breathed in relief, opening the message. The relief instantly transformed into ice-cold shock as I read. "Sorry, sis, none of us got the invite. Maybe check with the postal service? Have a nice day." My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. "This can't be happening." Jessica read the message over my shoulder, her expression morphing from confusion to outrage. "What the hell? You personally delivered their invitations." I immediately tried calling Madison. Straight to voicemail. Then my mother, same result. My father. Voicemail again. Ryan. Nothing. "They're blocking my calls," I whispered, the horrible truth dawning on me. "They're really not coming." Olivia, sensing the crisis, stepped in. "What's happening? Is there a problem with the family's arrival?" Jessica explained the situation while I sat frozen in shock, still clutching my phone. "That's highly unusual," Olivia said diplomatically. "Let me rearrange the seating to make the family absence less noticeable." While she hurried off to handle logistics, Alicia put her arm around my shoulders. "Rachel, I'm so sorry. This is beyond cruel." My phone buzzed with another notification. For a moment, hope flared. Perhaps one of them was explaining, apologizing. Instead, it was Jessica showing me her phone. She'd been checking social media and found a post from just 30 minutes earlier, a photo of my entire family, parents, Ryan and Madison, smiling at the country club, mimosas in hand. The caption read, "Perfect Saturday brunch with the people who matter most. Family time." The deliberate cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. They weren't stuck in traffic or dealing with an emergency. They were having brunch, publicly flaunting their absence from my wedding. A knock at the door interrupted my spiraling thoughts. Thomas's voice came through. "Rachel, can I come in?" "The groom can't see the bride before the ceremony," Alicia protested weakly. "I think traditional superstitions are the least of our concerns right now," Jessica replied, opening the door. Thomas entered, handsome in his charcoal suit. His expression creased with concern. When he saw my face, he immediately crossed the room and knelt before me. "Your mom called my mom," he said gently. "Told her none of your family would be attending due to unforeseen circumstances. My mother is. Well, she's furious on your behalf." Fresh tears spilled down my cheeks. "They're at the country club, Thomas. They deliberately chose not to come, and they're pretending they never got invited." His jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm, for my sake. "What do you want to do? We can postpone if you need to." Postpone? The word jolted me. No, absolutely not. That's exactly what they want for me to call it off, to bend to their will. We could elope instead, just us. I looked around at the bridal suite, at my beautiful dress hanging nearby, at my friends who had stood by me through everything. I thought about Thomas's parents who had welcomed me with open arms from day one. I thought about Olivia rushing to rearrange seating and all the guests who were arriving to celebrate with us. "No," I said, wiping my tears and squaring my shoulders. "We're getting married today, as planned. They don't get to take this from us." Thomas's smile was both proud and sad. "Are you sure?" Walking down that aisle alone. The thought made my heart clench, but I nodded firmly. "I won't be alone. I'll be walking toward you." At precisely 12:30, the chapel doors opened. The string quartet began playing Pachelbel's Canon in D, and our guests rose from their seats, turning to watch the entrance. My bridesmaids, Jessica and Alicia, proceeded down the aisle, each giving me an encouraging smile as they took their places. Then it was my turn. I stood alone at the entrance, my bouquet of white roses trembling slightly in my hands. The empty front row, where my family should have been, seemed to glare at me accusingly, despite Olivia's efforts to rearrange the seating. Taking a deep breath, I took my first step down the aisle, alone. The walk felt impossibly long. Each step reminded me of what should have been my father's arms supporting me, my mother watching proudly from the front row, Madison and Ryan smiling from their places of honor. Instead, I felt every eye on me, saw the whispers and confused glances, as guests noticed the conspicuous absence of my entire family. Halfway down the aisle, something unexpected happened. Thomas's father, James, suddenly stood from his seat in the front row. Without a word, he stepped into the aisle and offered me his arm. "May I?" he whispered. Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded, gratefully slipping my hand into the crook of his elbow. This man, who had known me for only 2 years, understood what I needed in that moment better than the people who had raised me. Together, we walked the remaining distance to where Thomas waited, his eyes shining with love and pride. When James placed my hand in his son's, he squeezed both our hands briefly before taking his seat beside his wife Susan, who was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "You look beautiful," Thomas whispered as we turned to face the officiant. The ceremony itself was more emotional than I had anticipated. The officiant, who had been briefed on the situation, adapted his words slightly, speaking eloquently about chosen family and the courage it takes to build a life based on love rather than obligation. When the time came for vows, Thomas went first. He had written his own, and his voice was steady as he promised, not only to love and cherish me, but to stand beside me through every storm, to be my shelter and my strength when others failed me. "Today, we become each other's family," he said, sliding the ring onto my finger. "The kind of family that shows up, that keeps its promises, that loves unconditionally." My own vows nearly stuck in my throat, but I managed to speak them through tears, promising to cherish the family we were creating together. "I choose you," I concluded, "today and every day. By the power vested in me," the officiant said warmly, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Thomas cradled my face gently, kissing me as our guests erupted in applause. For that perfect moment, the pain of my family's absence receded, replaced by the joy of beginning our life together. The reception was held in the chapel's adjoining garden. Olivia had worked minor miracles, rearranging tables to make the room feel full despite the missing guests. Thomas's mother, Susan, had gone above and beyond, personally welcoming everyone and making a special effort to introduce herself to my friends, treating them like family. "You're one of us now," she told me during a quiet moment, squeezing my hands warmly. We couldn't be happier about that. Despite the loving atmosphere, the missing tables where my family should have been celebrating remained a painful reminder of their betrayal. Several well-meaning guests asked about my parents, and I found myself mumbling vague explanations about unexpected circumstances. As Thomas and I prepared to cut the cake, I noticed a small, unmarked gift box that had been placed on the present table. The handwriting on the accompanying card was immediately familiar, my grandmother Gloria's distinctive script. Despite telling me about the family boycott, she hadn't been able to attend either, likely pressured by my mother. I slipped the card into my dress pocket, saving it to read privately later. At least one family member had thought of me today, even if she couldn't be present. The reception continued with dancing, toasts from our friends, and all the traditional moments of celebration. Through it all, I maintained my composure, determined not to let my family's cruelty ruin this day. But beneath my smile, a devastating question kept surfacing. How could the people who were supposed to love me most choose to hurt me so deliberately on what should have been the happiest day of my life? The morning after the wedding, Thomas and I lay in bed at the boutique hotel where we'd spent our wedding night, scrolling through photos friends had already posted of the celebration. The images showed a beautiful, joyful event you'd hardly notice anything was missing unless you knew to look for my absent family. "These turned out great," Thomas said, showing me a particularly nice shot of our first dance. I nodded, but my attention had been caught by something else, a notification from Instagram. Madison had tagged me in a post. My stomach clenching, I opened it. The image showed my entire family, parents, Ryan and Madison, posed around a country club dining table, mimosas raised in a toast. The timestamp indicated it had been taken during my ceremony. The caption read, "Family Day. So much better than some boring wedding. The best Bennett's family first." The deliberate cruelty took my breath away. Not only had they skipped my wedding, but they had orchestrated a competing family gathering and made sure I would see it. Those absolute. Thomas didn't finish his sentence, his face flushing with anger. "Rachel, this is beyond petty. This is calculated emotional abuse." I couldn't even cry. I felt hollow, scrubbed raw. "They really hate me that much? For marrying you?" "No," Thomas said firmly, pulling me into his arms. "This isn't about me, not really. This is about control. You defied them, and they couldn't handle it. I tried calling my parents' house, needing some explanation, some accountability for their actions. The housekeeper answered, informing me that Mr. and Mrs. Bennet were not available. When I asked her to tell them their daughter was calling, she hesitated. I'm sorry, Miss Rachel. I was instructed not to interrupt them for your calls. The confirmation that they were actively avoiding me stung. They had given instructions to their staff about me, like I was an unwanted solicitor rather than their daughter. Thomas and I had planned to drive to my parents' house directly, but I now realized how futile that would be. Instead, we packed for our honeymoon, a week in Hawaii that had been booked months earlier. Maybe the distance will be good, Thomas suggested as we headed to the airport. Give everyone time to cool down. I nodded, but inside I knew this wasn't a situation that would be improved by cooling down. The deliberate, coordinated nature of my family's actions suggested something far more calculated than a momentary anger. During our honeymoon, I received dozens of supportive messages from friends and from Thomas's family. Susan texted daily, sending little updates from home and checking that we were enjoying ourselves. Thomas's father sent a heartfelt email telling me how proud they were to welcome me to their family. The contrast with the complete silence from my own family couldn't have been more stark. I spent our idle hours on the beach, mentally reviewing my family history, searching for patterns I might have missed. Had there always been this conditional quality to their love? This controlling behavior? I remembered how my father had reacted when I chose to attend State University on scholarship rather than the private college he preferred. How my mother had coincidentally scheduled family vacations during times I'd planned to bring college friends home. How they'd subtly undermined every relationship I'd had, finding fault with every boyfriend regardless of his background or accomplishments. The pattern was clear in retrospect. Their love had always come with conditions. The difference now was that I had finally defied a condition too significant to ignore. I had married someone they deemed socially unsuitable. On our 5th day in Hawaii, I finally received contact from a family member. A text from Ryan appeared on my phone. You made your choice. We made ours. 7 words. Not an explanation or an apology, a justification. As if their collective punishment was a reasonable response to my marriage choice. I showed Thomas the message, my hands shaking. At least it's confirmation, he said quietly. This wasn't some misunderstanding or logistical problem. They deliberately chose not to attend. And they want me to know it, I added. When our honeymoon ended, we returned to our apartment to begin our married life. A stack of wedding gifts awaited opening, thank you notes needed writing, and normal life resumed. But I was changed. The trust I'd placed in my family had been shattered, and I wasn't sure if or how it could ever be repaired. One thing was certain, though. I needed answers. Real ones, not the gaslighting text from Madison or the cold justification from Ryan. I deserved to hear, directly from my parents, why they had chosen to hurt me so profoundly. What are you going to do? Thomas asked as we unpacked our suitcases. I'm going to confront them, I said, a new determination forming. All of them, together. I need to hear them say it to my face. 3 weeks after our wedding, I found myself sitting in my car outside my parents' imposing house, gathering courage. I knew from their predictable routine that Wednesday night was family dinner, a tradition I'd once been part of before being excommunicated for the crime of marrying the man I loved. Thomas had offered to come with me, but I'd decided this confrontation needed to happen alone. They'll just use your presence as an excuse to avoid the real conversation, I'd explained. At precisely 6:30, I walked up to the front door and used my key, which still worked, suggesting they hadn't considered me enough of a threat to change the locks. The sounds of conversation and clinking silverware led me to the dining room, where I found exactly what I expected. My parents, Ryan and Madison, seated around the table, enjoying a meal as if nothing was wrong, as if they hadn't collectively shattered my heart 3 weeks earlier. The conversation stopped abruptly when I appeared in the doorway. 4 pairs of eyes stared at me in shock. Rachel, my mother finally said, her voice cool. I didn't realize we were expecting you. Clearly, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. You haven't been expecting me for quite some time, it seems. My father set down his wine glass. If you've come to make a scene, I've come for an explanation, I cut in. I think I deserve that much. Madison rolled her eyes dramatically. Here we go with the victim routine. Victim routine? I repeated, incredulous. You all boycotted my wedding and then pretended you weren't invited. How exactly is that a routine? We never received formal invitations, my mother said primly. That's a lie, and you know it. I hand-delivered every single one. You confirmed you were coming. Dad promised to walk me down the aisle. Plans change, my father said dismissively. What plans? What could possibly have been more important than your daughter's wedding? Madison pulled out her phone. I never received an invitation. Look at my email, nothing from you about any wedding. I gave you a physical invitation, Madison, in your dorm room. You held it in your hand. I don't remember that, she said, though a slight flush contradicted her words. This is insane, I said, looking from face to face. You're really going to sit there and pretend this was all some misunderstanding about invitations? Perhaps if you'd been more organized with your planning, my mother suggested. A proper wedding takes more than 6 months to arrange. I pulled out my phone, opening the photo gallery. Here's a picture of me handing you the invitation, Mom. Here's Dad's text confirming he'd be there to walk me down the aisle. Here's Madison complaining about the bridesmaid dress fitting. Here's Ryan promising to pick up Grandma. I laid the phone on the table between them. So let's try this again. Why did none of you show up to my wedding? The room fell silent. My father and Ryan exchanged glances. Madison suddenly became very interested in her napkin. My mother maintained her icy composure. The silence was broken by the sound of the front door opening, followed by an older woman's voice calling out, "Hello? Am I late?" Grandma Gloria appeared in the dining room doorway, her eyes widening when she spotted me. "Rachel! Oh, my dear, I didn't know you'd be here." "None of us did," my mother said tersely. "Mother, you're late." Gloria surveyed the tense scene, understanding dawning in her eyes. "I see I've interrupted something important." "Actually, your timing is perfect," I said. "We were just discussing why everyone skipped my wedding while pretending they never received invitations." "Oh, for heaven's sake," Gloria exclaimed, setting down her purse with a thump. "Are you all still maintaining that ridiculous fiction? Rachel, dear, they received the invitations. They chose not to attend." "Mother!" My mother's voice held a warning. "Don't mother me, Karen. I'm too old for these games." Gloria turned to face me fully. "They gave you an ultimatum, didn't they? Postpone the wedding and reconsider your relationship with Thomas, or be cut off from the family." My breath caught. "No, they never said anything like that directly." "Of course they didn't. That would make them the villains in this story." Gloria shot a disapproving look around the table. "Instead, they hoped you'd guess their wishes and comply without them having to say the ugly part out loud." "Is that true?" I asked, looking directly at my father. His jaw tightened. We made our feelings about the match clear. "No, you didn't! You made vague comments about rushing and Thomas not being our sort, but you never once directly asked me to postpone or cancel." "We shouldn't have had to spell it out," my mother interjected. "You should have understood our concerns." "Your concerns about what? That Thomas is a teacher? That his father repairs cars for a living? That's what this is about?" "It's about making suitable choices," my father said. "About maintaining certain standards." "William!" Gloria's voice cracked like a whip. "Listen to yourself. These standards you're so concerned about, you didn't have them until your company took off. You were a contractor with dirt under your nails when you married Karen." My father flushed. That was different. Times were different. The pieces suddenly clicked together. "You really thought I'd choose your approval over the man I love," I said quietly. "You believed if you just refused to show up, I'd come crawling back, begging for forgiveness for marrying beneath your precious social station." "Don't be melodramatic," my mother said. Ryan, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "We thought you'd postpone when you realized how serious we were. Not just go through with it anyway." So you're shocked that I didn't cave to your manipulation? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Sorry to disappoint you all. The disappointment is mutual, my father said coldly. Throwing yourself away on a school teacher when you could have had anyone. He's clearly after your inheritance. My inheritance? I laughed incredulously. Thomas doesn't care about money. He's never once asked about my family's wealth. That's how the clever ones operate, my father insisted. These gold-digging types play the long game. The casual cruelty with which he dismissed Thomas, a man he'd barely made an effort to know, was the final straw. You know nothing about him, I said, standing up. And apparently, you know nothing about me either, if you thought this would work. If you believed for 1 second that I would choose your conditional approval over genuine love. I looked around the table at the people I'd once trusted most in the world. I came here hoping for an explanation, maybe even an apology. Instead, I got more lies and manipulation. I won't waste any more of your dinner time. As I turned to leave, Madison called after me, so dramatic. Always has to be the center of attention. I paused at the doorway, turning back one last time. Enjoy your family dinner. I hope your empty victory over my happiness tastes better than the wedding cake you missed. The drive home from my parents' house passed in a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, but I couldn't feel them. I couldn't feel anything, except a hollowness expanding in my chest, threatening to consume me entirely. Thomas was waiting up despite the late hour, his face tight with concern. How did it go? I opened my mouth to answer, but instead of words, a sob escaped. Then another, and another, until I was crying so hard I couldn't breathe, couldn't stand, couldn't think. Thomas guided me to the couch, holding me while I fell apart. He didn't ask questions, didn't offer platitudes, just provided the steady warmth of his presence while I processed the final death of the relationship I'd had with my family. When the storm of emotion finally subsided, I told him everything, the gaslighting about the invitations, my father's cruel accusations about Thomas being a gold digger, Madison's dismissal of my feelings as dramatic. They never intended to come, I concluded, my voice raw from crying. They thought I would choose them over you if they just applied enough pressure. And now? Thomas asked gently. What happens now? I don't know, I admitted. I always thought family was forever, no matter what. But they've shown me that their version of family comes with conditions I can't accept. Over the next few days, the reality of this new estrangement settled around me like a heavy cloak. I'd lost not just my immediate family, but an entire support system. Holidays, birthdays, casual Sunday dinners, all the rhythms and rituals of family life were suddenly gone. The grief came in waves. Sometimes I'd be fine, going about my day, and then a memory would ambush me. My father teaching me to ride a bike, my mother bringing soup when I was sick in college, Madison and I sharing secrets during late-night talks. Had those moments been real? Had they loved me then? Or had it always been conditional? A week after the confrontation, I received an unexpected phone call from Grandma Gloria. Rachel, dear, I've been so worried about you. Can I come see you? The following afternoon, Gloria arrived at our apartment, moving more slowly with her cane, but still carrying herself with dignity. She embraced me tightly before settling onto our couch. I want to tell you something important, she began. What your parents are doing, it's a pattern. They did the same thing to your cousin Eliza when she married her husband Jorge. Cousin Eliza? But we see them at family gatherings. Eliza was my father's brother's daughter, a few years older than me. Now you do. But for the first 2 years of their marriage, your father and uncle pressured everyone to freeze them out. Eventually, when Eliza didn't divorce Jorge as they expected, they reluctantly allowed them back into the fold, though they're still treated differently. I struggled to process this information. Why? Because Jorge is Hispanic? Gloria nodded sadly. The Bennetts weren't always like this. Your grandfather, God rest his soul, would be ashamed of how status-conscious they've become. She reached for my hand. There's something else you should know. Your father's business isn't doing as well as they pretend. They've been covering financial troubles for years, maintaining appearances while debt piles up. How do you know this? Your grandfather left me as a trustee on some of the business holdings. I see the reports. William has been making increasingly risky investments trying to maintain their lifestyle. That's partly why they're so focused on advantageous marriages for their children. They're hoping to align with wealthy families. The revelation added a new dimension to their behavior. Their rejection wasn't just about snobbery, it was about financial desperation disguised as social climbing. And my career success threatens Dad's ego, I added, thinking about my recent promotion at the architectural firm. He always hated that I'm doing well on my own merits rather than through his connections. After Gloria left, Thomas and I had a serious conversation about how to move forward. Maybe we should just make a clean break, Thomas suggested. They've shown who they are. Do you really want people this toxic in our lives, even peripherally? Part of me recognized the wisdom in his words. The manipulation, the gaslighting, the deliberate cruelty, all suggested a deeply unhealthy dynamic that might be better severed completely. But another part of me couldn't quite let go. They're still my family, I said softly, despite everything. Family should love unconditionally, Thomas countered. They should build you up, not tear you down. What they did wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a calculated campaign to control you by inflicting maximum emotional damage. He was right, of course. But 30 years of attachment couldn't be erased overnight, no matter how logically I understood the toxicity of the relationship. I need time, I finally said. I'm not ready to make permanent decisions yet. In the absence of my biological family, I found myself drawing closer to other connections. Thomas's parents invited us for Sunday dinners that became a weekly tradition. Susan called regularly just to chat, filling the maternal role my own mother had abandoned. James taught me to change my car's oil, a practical skill delivered with the kind of patient affection my father had rarely shown. I also reconnected with cousin Eliza, reaching out via social media to suggest coffee. Our shared experience of family rejection created an immediate bond. They'll eventually reach out, she predicted as we sat in a cafe near my office. Not to apologize they're incapable of that, but to re-establish contact on their terms. The question is whether you'll accept those terms. Did you, with Jorge? We set strict boundaries. They can be in our lives, but the moment they disrespect Jorge or our choices, we leave. It's exhausting but better than complete estrangement, at least for us. I also strengthened connections with friends who had become like family. Jessica and Alicia checked on me daily, organizing brunches and movie nights to ensure I didn't isolate myself in my grief. Thomas's college roommate Michael and his wife Tara, who had attended our wedding, became regular dinner companions. Gradually, we built a chosen family around us, people connected by love and mutual respect rather than simply DNA. 2 months after the confrontation, I received a formal-looking envelope in the mail. Inside was a letter from my family's attorney, Patricia Walton, outlining proposed terms for a reconciliation. The document included a request for a postnuptial agreement protecting family assets and requiring my agreement not to publicly discuss the wedding incident. They can't be serious, Thomas said, reading over my shoulder. They're treating this like a corporate merger. They're trying to protect their image, I realized. This isn't about reconciliation, it's about damage control. A call to Grandma Gloria confirmed my suspicion. The family business was indeed in trouble, and my inheritance share might soon be needed to keep it afloat. Their sudden interest in reconciliation had nothing to do with missing me, and everything to do with accessing my potential financial contribution. The realization was both painful and freeing. This wasn't about Thomas. It wasn't even really about me. It was about money and control, wrapped in the veneer of family loyalty. I placed the attorney's letter in a drawer, unanswered. Some offers didn't even deserve a rejection. 2 months after the attorney's letter, I received a text from my mother that took me by surprise. We should talk. Coffee at Bluebird Cafe tomorrow? 2 p.m. I stared at the message for a long time, emotions warring within me. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely, to maintain the protective distance I'd established. Another part desperately hoped for genuine reconciliation, for some acknowledgement of the pain they'd caused. After discussing it with Thomas and with my therapist, whom I'd started seeing to help process the family trauma, I decided to go, but with firmly established boundaries and realistic expectations. The Bluebird Cafe was neutral territory, a place we'd occasionally met for casual catch-ups in the past. I arrived 5 minutes early to find my mother already seated at a corner table, impeccably dressed as always, a porcelain cup of tea in front of her. "Rachel," she greeted me, her smile tight. "Thank you for coming." I sat across from her, declining her offer to order me something. "You wanted to talk?" She adjusted her napkin precisely. "Yes, this estrangement has gone on long enough, don't you think? It's time to put this unfortunate misunderstanding behind us." "Misunderstanding?" I repeated, keeping my voice level. "You deliberately boycotted my wedding, lied about it, and then accused my husband of being a gold digger. Which part of that is a misunderstanding?" Her smile became strained. "We all made mistakes. You rushed into marriage without considering our concerns. We perhaps overreacted. Both sides have valid points. I recognized the tactic immediately, the false equivalence, the attempt to distribute blame equally for a situation that was entirely one-sided. "What do you really want, Mom?" I asked directly. "Because this doesn't sound like an apology." She sighed, dropping the pretense slightly. "Your father and I would like to move forward. Family should be together, especially in challenging times." "Challenging times? You mean the business difficulties Dad's having?" Her eyes widened slightly before she recovered her composure. "I don't know what you've heard, but William is doing just fine. The market has its ups and downs, that's all. Grandma Gloria is a trustee. She sees the financial reports." This revelation clearly unsettled her. Mothers should be more discreet about family matters. "Is that what this is about? The family attorney sent me paperwork about protecting family assets. Are you here because you need my inheritance share to bail out the business?" "Don't be crude, Rachel. This is about healing our family rift." "On what terms, exactly?" She hesitated, then produced an envelope from her purse, another legal document, I suspected. "We're prepared to welcome you and Thomas back into the family fold. Your father has drawn up a reasonable post-nuptial agreement protecting certain family interests. It's standard practice, really." I didn't touch the envelope. "And the wedding incident? My public humiliation? Water under the bridge," she said with a dismissive wave. "We'll all agree not to discuss it outside the family. A united front. So no apology, no acknowledgement of the pain you caused, just a financial agreement and a pact of silence." "Rachel, you're being difficult. We're extending an olive branch here." "No, you're extending a contract. There's a difference." The conversation deteriorated from there. It became increasingly clear that this reconciliation attempt was purely transactional. They needed access to my inheritance share to address business problems, and they wanted to control the narrative around their wedding absence to save face socially. When I left the cafe an hour later, the envelope remained untouched on the table between us. My next stop was to the offices of Patricia Walton, not as a client, but as an information seeker. As I suspected, the family business was in serious financial difficulty, overextended with loans and failing investments. My inheritance share, established by my grandparents, was held in a trust that became accessible to me upon marriage. My parents needed those funds, but couldn't access them without my cooperation. "The irony is breathtaking," I told Thomas that evening. "They boycotted our wedding because they disapproved of you, but our marriage is what activated my trust fund, which they now desperately need." "What are you going to do?" he asked. "Nothing," I said simply. "I'm not signing anything. I'm not agreeing to their silent reconciliation. If they want a relationship with me, it needs to be genuine, based on love and respect, not financial necessity." The decision brought both sadness and liberation. I was formally declining the chance to re-enter the family fold, but I was also refusing to participate in their manipulative games. Over the next few weeks, I strengthened my relationships with the people who had shown me what unconditional love truly meant. Thomas's parents continued their Sunday dinner tradition, now expanded to include friends who had become like family to us. You know, in some cultures, friends are considered family by choice rather than by blood, Susan told me one Sunday as we prepared dessert together. I've always thought that was a beautiful concept. My connection with cousin Eliza deepened as well. Having walked a similar path of family rejection and conditional reconciliation, she understood my struggles intimately. They never really change, she warned me during one of our coffee dates. They just adapt their tactics. Jorge and I maintain contact for our children's sake, but we never forget what they showed us about their true values. I also nurtured a growing friendship with Grandma Gloria, visiting her weekly and soaking up family stories from a time before status and money had corrupted my parents' values. Through these connections, chosen family rather than assigned by birth, I began to heal. The pain didn't disappear, but it became manageable, a dull ache rather than a sharp stab. A surprising development came when my brother Ryan contacted me, asking to meet privately. We arranged to have lunch at a quiet restaurant near my office. "I owe you an apology," he said immediately after we sat down. "What we did skipping your wedding, the country club photos, all of it was cruel and inexcusable." The directness of his admission caught me off guard. "What changed your mind?" "I've been seeing someone," he admitted. "Someone Dad and Mom wouldn't approve of. She's amazing, a kindergarten teacher, actually, like Thomas," and suddenly all their elitist nonsense hit differently. I started imagining them boycotting my wedding, and he trailed off, looking genuinely remorseful. "They pressured you to join the boycott, didn't they?" I asked gently. He nodded. "Dad threatened to cut me out of the business if I attended, said we needed to present a united front." He met my eyes directly. "It was cowardly of me to give in. I should have been there for you." His apology was the first genuine acknowledgement I'd received from any family member about the wedding incident. While it didn't erase the pain, it provided a small bridge across the chasm that had formed. "I'd like us to try to have a relationship," Ryan said. "Just us, on our terms. No parental interference." I agreed to cautious, limited contact with my brother. We began with occasional text messages, gradually building to monthly lunches. He kept his relationship with our parents separate from our reconnection, respecting my boundaries and never pressuring me toward broader family reconciliation. As our first wedding anniversary approached, I received a formal legal document from the family attorney. It was a final attempt to secure my cooperation with their financial needs, a more aggressive approach with thinly veiled threats about potential legal challenges to my inheritance if I didn't comply. I forwarded it to my own attorney without response. The document represented the final confirmation that my parents viewed me as a financial resource rather than a daughter they had genuinely missed. The inheritance they were so desperate to access would remain untouched. Thomas and I had built our life together based on our own earnings, our own efforts. We had something far more valuable than money we had: authenticity, mutual respect, and love without conditions. As our first anniversary approached, I found myself reflecting on the tumultuous year that had passed since our wedding day. The pain of my family's betrayal had evolved, not disappeared, but transformed into something more manageable, a scar rather than an open wound. Thomas suggested we plan something special to reclaim the date. "Let's create new memories," he said. "Ones that celebrate what we've built together, rather than dwelling on what we lost." I wrote a formal letter to my parents declining their legal arrangement and establishing clear boundaries for any future contact. The letter was neither angry nor accusatory, simply firm in its delineation of what I would and would not accept in a relationship going forward. "I remain open to genuine reconciliation, based on mutual respect and acknowledgement of past hurts," I wrote in conclusion. "But I will not participate in relationships conditioned on financial arrangements or maintained through emotional manipulation." I sent similar letters to Madison and to the family attorney, making my position clear to all involved. Only Ryan was excluded, as we had already established our own tentative path forward. With these boundaries firmly established, I turned my attention to celebrating the life and relationships that had flourished, despite, or perhaps because of the family rupture. For our anniversary, Thomas surprised me with a thoughtfully compiled photo album of our wedding day. The images had been carefully selected and arranged to emphasize the joy and love that had filled the ceremony and reception, rather than the conspicuous absences. "Look at the faces in these photos," Thomas said as we turned the pages together. "See how happy everyone is for us? How genuinely they're celebrating our love?" The album featured candid shots of Thomas's parents embracing me, of Jessica and Alicia laughing during their speeches, of friends dancing and celebrating late into the night. The empty chairs that had seemed so glaring on the day itself were barely noticeable in these carefully chosen images. "This is what I want us to remember," Thomas said softly. "Not who was missing, but who was there. The people who showed up, who supported us unconditionally." His gift helped me recognize how much I had actually gained through this painful year. My definition of family had expanded beyond bloodlines to encompass a community built on choice and authentic connection. To mark our anniversary, we hosted a dinner party in our apartment for this chosen family: Thomas's parents, Jessica and Alicia, cousin Eliza and her husband Jorge, Grandma Gloria, and a few other close friends who had stood by us through everything. As we raised glasses for a toast, I looked around at these beloved faces and felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for months. A year ago, I thought family was defined by DNA and legal documents, I said. I've since learned that true family is defined by showing up not just for celebrations, but for difficult conversations, for painful moments, for everyday joys and struggles. Susan wiped away a tear, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Thomas and I are so grateful to each of you for teaching us what unconditional love looks like," I continued. "You've shown us that family isn't something you're merely born into, it's something you build, choice by choice, day by day." The conversation flowed easily throughout the evening, punctuated by laughter and genuine warmth. When Ryan called to wish us happy anniversary, I put him on speakerphone so he could join the celebration from afar. Our relationship remained cautious but healing, a small bridge across the family divide. As our guests departed late that night, I felt a profound sense of gratitude replace the grief that had dominated so much of the past year. The family rejection that had once seemed like an ending had actually created space for new beginnings, for deeper friendships, for honest relationships, for personal growth I might never have experienced otherwise. Thomas and I began tentatively discussing starting our own family, both acutely aware of the responsibility to break toxic cycles and create a healthier model of parental love than the one I had experienced. "I'm scared," I admitted during one of these conversations. "What if I repeat the patterns? What if I don't know how to love unconditionally because I never experienced it?" "You already know how," Thomas assured me. "Look at how you love our friends. How you've forgiven Ryan despite everything. How you've kept the door open for reconciliation even after all your family did. Your capacity for love is what drew me to you from the beginning." As we approached the decision to try for children, I committed to continuing therapy, determined to process my family trauma rather than transmitting it to the next generation. "The greatest gift we can give our future children," my therapist observed, "is doing our own healing work before they arrive." The lessons of that painful wedding day and its aftermath had transformed me in ways I was only beginning to understand. I had learned that love worth having never comes with conditions or ultimatums. That showing up physically, emotionally, consistently is how we demonstrate what matters to us. That family can be found and created, not just inherited. Most importantly, I had learned that while we cannot control how others treat us, we can control how we respond, choosing dignity over retaliation, boundaries over bitterness, growth over stagnation. Looking back at the empty chairs on my wedding day, I no longer see only absence and betrayal. I see the space that was created for something new to grow, something authentic, nurturing, and freely chosen. Have you ever experienced family rejection or had to create boundaries with toxic relatives? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more about my journey. Share this video with someone who might need to be reminded that family is about who shows up for you, not just who shares your DNA. Thank you for being part of my healing process. And remember, sometimes the family we create matters more than the family we're born into.